So I found this article on PubMed, which, you're experts, but it was back from 2020. Now, I understand after I read this, even though it's true, but the reason for doing it is always for something else. As James Lindsay says, what communism does is it ties truth to a lie. So even though what they say in here about nurses and the Holocaust is true, the history, all that, what their overall goal is to make America fundamentally, it's just racist, always has been. Again, when you say something systemic, it's almost like there's no point in trying to make anything better. It's just no good. So, but I wanted to read this about the Holocaust because it is true how there's not many people that are still alive that did live through the Holocaust. And so this was two educators, nursing educators, because if the history's forgotten, it may get repeated. So it's not very long. I just wanted to read because this is how much nurses took part in it. Prior to the mass extermination of the Jews at Auschwitz and other extermination camps, nurses actively participated in execution of tens of thousands of mentally, physically, and emotionally ill German citizens. Nursing educators must ensure that nursing students not only know about the Holocaust, but that they know that ordinary nurses were directly involved in the identification of vulnerable humans to be killed and actually murdered them. Social, economic, and political pressures today have the potential to encourage nurses to act in ways that violate personal or professional values. So the whole point to this article, because again, communists can't really see how that they're projecting exactly who they are. This is that nurses on an individual basis can't do anything. You must be part of an organization in order for nothing like this to happen. Yeah, coming from PubMed, yeah. So even though what I'm going to read about the Holocaust is correct, they're trying to say the only way to prevent it again is that you have to be part of an organization. No, you have to be able to critically think. And if you're the only one that can do that, you still have to stand on your own and do it. So, but moving on. So it says here that about it needs to be put in the curriculum of nursing so that nurses do not forget how and why nurses in Germany came to murder more than 10,000 people in their care. And then it goes on to say, long before the final solution of the Jewish question and mass extermination of Jews at Auschwitz and other extermination camps, as I said, nurses actively participated in the execution of tens of thousands of Germans. And they refer to a book from 1920 called The Sanctioning of the Destruction of Lives Unworthy to Live. And it says, in this book, the term euthanasia was used to describe the mercy killings of patients with terminal illness, lunatics, and those who were comatose or living miserable lives. An analysis of the terms euthanasia and mercy killing is beyond the scope of this article. However, it is important to note that they both typically imply a degree of volunteerism and or the presence of an incurable and painful condition which causes suffering. What happened in Nazi Germany was not euthanasia or mercy killing. Yeah, it was straight up murder. The German law for the prevention of hereditary diseased offspring was passed in 1933, legalizing racial health courts and involuntary sterilization. Then, in 1938, the father of a child born blind, and then it says in quotes, retarded, and missing an arm and a leg, wrote to Hitler asking that his child be granted a mercy death, or euthanasia. His request was granted. A 1939 law mandated that midwives register with local health authorities any child born with congenital deformities. They were paid 2 Reichmarks for every registration. In 1941, doctors, nurses, and teachers were ordered to report any handicapped minor to authorities. Sound familiar? Like everybody has to know how many vaccines you've had, when you had them. This reporting and registration resulted in the killing of 5,000 to 10,000 infants and children as nurses injected children with morphine, forced the ingestion of phenobarbital, or starved them in facilities across Germany. The euthanasia program then shifted to institutionalized physical and mentally disabled adults. These individuals were described as not contributing to society in any material way. In fact, they were portrayed as draining society of resources and were ultimately labeled, listen, as useless feeders. Useless feeders. Yeah, Noah Yuval Harari, what does he call us? Useless eaters? Well, back then they said useless feeders. Policies and propaganda were developed to convince German citizens that it was in their own best interest to differently manage scarce health care resources. This argument became even stronger as the war escalated, and all German resources, including food, hospital beds, and healthcare providers, were needed to support the war effort. Between 1939 and 1945, more than 10,000 ill and disabled German adults were murdered by nurses in psychiatric hospitals. This program of systematic killing is known as Aktion T4, an abbreviation for the street address in Berlin for which the program was operationalized. Arguments that the involvement of nurses in the Holocaust was isolated to evil Nazi nurses, that individual values and institutional codes are preventative, or that such things could never happen again or here in the United States are fallacies. Religion, codes, American values, and individual resistance cannot be relied upon as defenses against future abuses, and the American history is filled with its own examples of mistreatment of vulnerable citizens. See, that's ultimately their goal. You won't be able to stop yourself. You can't just stand up against it yourself. You have to be part of an organization. No, if you can critically think, you can stand up against and not go along with things you shouldn't. The eugenics movement is an example. Yeah, that started in America. It's still a thing. The term eugenics was coined by Sir Francis Galton, Charles Darwin's half-cousin, and literally translates to well-born. The two shared a passion for understanding human hereditary. During the first few decades of the 20th century, eugenist ideas were widely accepted by the scientific and public health communities in America. It was believed that selective breeding had the potential to transform the human race. Control of human reproduction was viewed as a scientific solution to social problems, a way to weed out the unfit and propagate talent and intelligence. The creation of a stronger society was thought to be possible through the breeding out of certain characteristics and the breeding in of other characteristics. In 1907, India passed the first law to legalize compulsory sterilization on eugenic grounds, and several, I think it's Indiana. I don't think it's India, it's cut off. In several other states, it's in Indiana. And several other states followed suit. When German racial hygienists were crafting their own law, they looked to America for guidelines. Yeah, so then why do we still have these professional organizations, the ones that were racist and went along with this? Why are they setting the standard of care? Like, they shouldn't. They even came out and said how racist they were in their history, and then we're supposed to trust them, and then they go along with DEI showing you shouldn't trust them. It said here a 1937 Gallup poll showed that 45% of American population was in favor of euthanasia for defective infants. In 1947, in response to the trial of 23 doctors and associates accused of crimes against humanity and human experimentation, the Nuremberg Code was created. We all know that. That's what brought in you have to have consent and all of those different ethics that don't seem to be around anymore. Not really. Then it goes on to talk about the Willowbrook study, which involved the intentional exposure of hepatitis to mentally disabled children to study antibodies and immunity to diseases. This study ran from 1956 to 71. I'll follow this up because there's a little bit more they reveal. Yeah, surprising. but true facts.